gun was already on the table, and the man she was sent to destroy was already watching her. Sophia noticed him before she should have, before the professional thing to do was notice anything at all. He was at the head of the table, jacket open, one hand resting flat on the surface, completely still in the way that only very controlled or very dangerous people manage. And his eyes were on her with the quality of someone who had already arrived at a conclusion and was simply waiting for the evidence to confirm it. She looked away, arranged her notepad, uncapped her pen. He doesn't know anything. You're invisible. You've always been invisible. The negotiation opened. She translated. Clean, professional, colorless, the voice of furniture. Then he spoke, not to the room, to her. You're shaking. Everything stopped. And Sophia didn't look up. She let the silence stretch exactly 3 seconds. Long enough to seem human, short enough not to seem afraid. Then he smirked. Slow. Private. Good. The silence had texture now. It means, he said very quietly, you're not as harmless as you're pretending to be. She made herself look up. He was already looking back. Dark eyes. No hurry. No apology for the fact that he had just pulled her cover like a loose thread in front of 12 of the most dangerous men in Los Angeles, with a smile that made something sharp and inconvenient happen behind her sternum. She breathed. She was in serious, serious trouble. And the worst part, the part she would not examine until she was alone, was that some traitorous, deeply inconvenient part of her was not entirely unhappy about it. 3 hours before that table and that smirk, Sophia Kane was in a parking structure off the 405 eating a gas station sandwich and running her cover for the last time. She had been 4 different people in her working life. She had done things in 3 languages in places where roads didn't have names, and the people who sent you somewhere were never the people who brought you back. She was 31 years old, and her real file, the one in the server she wasn't supposed to know existed, described her with phrases like exceptional compartmentalization and performs optimally under lethal threat, followed by a note added 3 years ago in a different font. Subject discontinued cooperation. Status non-compliant. Location unknown. They had found her anyway, 6 weeks ago. A man in a gray coat in a Pasadena diner. And a photograph on the table between them. Her saying no, then yes in that order, in under 4 minutes. Her cover was clean. Sophia Kane, certified Korean English-French interpreter, Tier 1, 6 years of corporate and legal experience, no history of anything that would make criminals nervous. Her real history, 12 deployments, 4 identities, a specialty in counterintelligence operations that her mother didn't know about and her father hadn't lived long enough to ask about, was buried under enough paper to keep anyone satisfied for a surface-level check. If anyone ran deep, she was finished. She knew that going in. She was also the only person her handlers had who could do this, and they both knew that too, which was why the man in the gray coat had used the photograph instead of asking nicely. She finished the sandwich. She drove to Koreatown. The building rented itself out for weddings and corporate events, and apparently also for meetings where everyone left their phones at the door. 2 men with earpieces ran her credentials, took her bag, pointed her toward the conference room with the warmth of people who had never once been warm. She walked in and read the room in 4 seconds. 12 people. The Korean delegation led by Park Hyun-soo, mid-50s, gray at the temples, the stillness of a man who had stopped performing power because he simply had it. The Americans, financial, soft, the specific anxiety of people who had crossed a line and were now fully understanding where it had been. And the man at the head of the table. The file had said 36 and strategically exceptional, and she had thought she knew what that meant. And the photograph had not prepared her for the actual version, which was leaning back in his chair, jacket open, one hand on the table, looking at absolutely nothing. Not bored, something more unsettling than bored. The quality of a man who had arrived exactly when he planned to, found everything as expected, and was at rest in the specific way of something that is never fully at rest. She looked at him for 1 second, the professional length, and looked away. She did not see him start watching her, The negotiation opened. Park laid out terms. Sophia translated. Smooth, flat, colorless. Voices went around the table, and she moved them through herself like water, leaving nothing behind. Except she was leaving things behind. She was clocking everything. The surface deal, distribution rights for a logistics company out of Incheon, and the thing underneath it that was never named. 2 exits and 1 window. Who was armed and where they carried. The visiting American in the 3rd chair, whose right hand hadn't moved from his lap in 20 minutes. She was also, and this was the part she was managing, increasingly aware that Jae-won Oh had not spoken once and had not stopped watching her. She felt it. She had been trained to feel surveillance, to name it, to file it away, and continue functioning. The problem was that this particular surveillance didn't feel hostile. It felt considered, warm almost, in a way that had no clean professional label. She kept translating. In the 12th exchange, she introduced one deliberate error. Park referenced certain considerations in the South, and she rendered it as regional factors, scrubbing the Busan implications she wasn't ready to confirm she'd understood. And she felt, precisely then, the quality of attention from the head of the table shift. She kept her face completely still. Then the meeting concluded, and people began to pack up, and she exhaled quietly and reached for her notepad. "You're shaking." The room stopped. She did not look up. 3 seconds. "Good." She looked up. He was watching her with dark, unhurried eyes and that fraction of a smile that was not cruelty and not amusement, and was therefore more difficult to manage than either. And she felt, against her will, against every layer of training she had, something warm and inconvenient moved through her chest. She kept her face exactly still. She was extremely good at keeping her face still. This, she thought, is already a problem. She almost made the door. "Miss Kane, stay." She stopped, turned around. The room was emptying, the last of the Americans filing out, Choi holding the door, giving nothing away. Jae-won Oh was still at the table, jacket still open, watching her with the same absolute calm, as if the last 5 minutes had happened exactly as he'd expected. "Sit," he said. She sat. He poured water, for himself only, a deliberate exclusion she clocked and filed. Took 1 sip, set the glass down, said nothing. Just looked at her with those eyes that were doing what they'd been doing since she walked in. Reading, quietly without rushing. She let the silence sit. The first one to fill it lost something. He let it sit longer than she expected. "Who are you, really?" "Sophia Kane, certified." "I know what the badge says." Conversational, almost gentle. "I'm asking what it doesn't." "I'm not sure what you're—" "You translated 12 exchanges," he said. 11. Perfect. The 12th, Park's reference to considerations in the South, you translated it as regional factors. He paused. The correct rendering carries a specific implication about a transit point in Busan. Industry-specific phrasing. A translator at your level would know it. He tilted his head slightly. "You knew it. I watched you process it. And you chose not to include it." The room was quiet. He was closer than he'd been across the conference table. Just a smaller surface between them now. And she was acutely aware of the geometry of it, the particular distances. "I made a judgment call." "Try again," he said. Not hard, not cold, patient. And the tone of someone who already has the answer and is simply giving her the opportunity to arrive at it herself. She said nothing. He nodded as if that confirmed something. "You scanned this room when you walked in. You checked exits before faces. You noted who was armed and where they were carrying before you took your seat." He paused. "In under 30 seconds. I watched you do all of it. I was nervous." "You weren't nervous," he said. "Nervous people look at faces. You looked at hands." Her jaw tightened. She caught it, controlled it. A half-second late. His eyes moved to her jaw, back to her eyes. He saw it. "Who sent you?" he said quietly. "No one sent me. The agency doesn't have you on this placement. I had it checked 20 minutes ago." The floor shifted under her. She kept breathing, kept her face still. "And there must be a clerical—" "There's no error." He stood, and he was taller than the seated distance had suggested, and he moved to the window. Not toward her, just away from the table, giving her the space or denying her a clear read on his next move. She couldn't tell which. I'd like you to stay in Los Angeles. Compensated. Freedom of movement. He looked at her over his shoulder. And I will find out who you are. The only question is how complicated you'd like the process to be. And if I refuse, he looked at her steadily. You won't. She hated that he was right. She hated specifically the certainty with which he said it. Not as a threat, but as a fact, as if he'd already mapped her, and the map had told him something she hadn't decided to share yet. All right, she said. He turned back to the window. Or her jaw was tight again, and this time she let it be. He put her 2 blocks from his residence. Choi delivered clothes, a monitored phone, and a message. Available at 9 tomorrow morning. She sat on the hotel bed and ran threat assessments until 3 in the morning, when she finally stopped pretending the most significant variable in her current situation was operational. It wasn't operational. It was the way he'd said try again. Low, patient, the specific warmth of someone who thinks you're capable of more than you're giving them. And the way his eyes had moved to her jaw when she'd slipped, quick and sharp, and then back to her face, and he hadn't said anything about it, had just filed it away somewhere behind those dark, unhurried eyes. Stop it, she told herself. She did not stop it. She got better at pretending to. And the next 4 days redrew the map of everything she'd prepared for. The file on Jae-won Oh had been thorough on structure, financials, known associates, jurisdictions. It had not been thorough on the man. It hadn't described the 4 languages he moved between based on precision rather than performance. It hadn't described the way he read until 2 in the morning, so that by noon she could see the tiredness sitting just behind his eyes. It hadn't described the specific quality of dry, exact humor that crossed his face sometimes. So quick she almost missed it every time. And it had not described what it felt like to be the thing he was paying attention to. He kept her close, ostensibly for surveillance, and she knew that she was cataloging it. She was building her own file on him simultaneously. But there was something in the quality of his proximity that her professional vocabulary didn't have a word for. He didn't circle. He didn't press. He simply worked around her and watched and occasionally said things that had more underneath them than they appeared to. On day 3, he took her to a closed restaurant for lunch. Cold noodles. No one else in the room. You grew up in 2 worlds, he said. Most people do. Not like that. He was looking at her steadily. There's a specific kind of alertness that comes from learning early that you have to translate yourself for every room. Not just the language. Everything. Is that what you see? That's what I recognize in, he said. She looked at him across the table. The food was untouched between them. She felt very distinctly his gaze on the side of her face when she looked away, warm and deliberate and entirely unhurried. And when she looked back, his eyes were already there, waiting, not pretending they hadn't been. Her hand was on her chopsticks. His hand was on the table, 6 inches from hers. Neither of them moved. She picked up the chopsticks. She ate. She kept every line of her face exactly where it was supposed to be, and she was aware with complete precision that her pulse was doing something it had no operational justification for doing. I am in so much trouble, she thought, and said nothing, and ate her noodles like a professional. On day 4, at exactly the wrong moment, someone tried to kill him, but she moved first. The Silver Lake meeting was quiet. Just Jae-won, 3 others, a delegate from Seoul. She was placed to his left and slightly behind, which put her close enough to catch every register of his voice. Close enough also to see the man against the far wall. He'd come in with the security team. Same clothes, same positioning. Almost. But she had spent enough time in prepared rooms with prepared men to recognize the specific angle of a right arm managing hidden weight. She recognized it because she had held her own arm that way. In Busan, 30 seconds before everything went wrong, she didn't decide. Her body decided. She was out of the chair before the room registered she'd moved. She had his wrist controlled. Angle, torque, joint against itself. And the gun hit the floor and she had it up and aimed before the echo finished. 5 people, 4 of them stunned. Jae-won Oh, standing now, already moved. Not away from the threat, she clocked immediately toward it, watching her with an expression she had not seen on his face before. Not shock, something rawer than that, something he shut down in about half a second before anyone else could read it. She kept the weapon up. Steady. Everyone out, he said. The room emptied. The door closed. He came around the table on an angle, not straight at her, not away, the way you approach something that might bolt, and stopped about 4 feet away. 4 feet, the gun still in her hand. You moved before the threat was visible, he said. I saw his position shift. Where did you learn to read a position shift like that? Somewhere I don't talk about. He looked at the gun in her hand. He looked at her hand, edge which was steady. He looked at her face. Something shifted in his jaw, barely, almost imperceptible. And then he said very quietly, You saved my life. Don't make it sentimental. I'm not, he said. I'm making it factual. He took one step forward. Tell me something true, Sophia. Her name, just her name. Low, deliberate, like he'd been deciding whether to use it. She set the gun on the table. I used to work for people worse than you. How much worse? The kind that gets redacted before the file exists. He took another step. He was close enough now that she could see, in the way you can only see things at close range, the exact quality of the attention he was directing at her. Not strategic, not transactional. The full, real weight of a person who has decided to look at you. Her throat moved. She controlled the rest of it. Imasa now, he said. Now I don't. Why? Because some things cost more than the objective is worth, she said, and I stopped being willing to pay them. The space between them had gone very still. He hadn't moved again, but somehow the distance felt smaller than it was, and she was aware of everything. His hands at his sides, the exact quality of his breathing, the fact that the gun was on the table and neither of them had reached for it. His eyes moved briefly to her mouth, back to her eyes. 1 second, maybe less. Come back tomorrow, he said. We're not finished. She left. She got in the elevator and stood with her back against the wall and breathed slowly until the floor numbers changed and the doors opened and she walked out into the night. Her pulse was doing something unconscionable. She walked faster. The next 3 days ran at the temperature of a slow burn, with something ticking underneath it. He kept her close. She was gathering intelligence. She was doing her job. She was building the file. But she was also being gathered slowly, piece by piece, in the way that someone attentive and patient gathers a person they've decided to understand. He worked around her. He moved through the same spaces and spoke to her with an evenness that made her calibration constant work. He disagreed with her directly, twice on translation choices she made deliberately to test his read. And both times he was right, and both times he said so without making it a performance, just accurate. She found directness more difficult to manage than charm. Charm she could root around. He wasn't charming. He was honest, which was worse. And on the 5th day, she noticed him watching her hands, not calculating, not threat assessing, just watching, the way a person watches something they're drawn to and are choosing not to act on, as she turned the pages of a document he'd given her to review. She felt it on her knuckles like warmth. She turned a page. He looked away. She exhaled carefully through her nose. The clock was ticking, and she knew it. Her handlers had given her 1 more week, the Busan endpoint. Whatever moved through the cold storage. Every day she was here was a day someone else was running a thread she couldn't see. She found him on the 6th evening standing at his window with his back to the room after a call she'd watched change the quality of his stillness completely. Not on his face, in his shoulders, and when the precise adjustment of how he was holding himself. He turned and looked at her, and the window light was behind him, and she had the involuntary thought that he was completely unfair to look at when he wasn't managing anything. She managed that thought immediately. There are people, he said, who believe what I'm building will eventually become something they can't contain. They're right. He paused. What I don't know is whether they want to stop it or burn the ground it's built on. What's the difference? Whether the people depending on it survive, he said. She went very still. The Busan operation, he said. What moves through the cold storage? Her pulse spiked. She controlled it. It's not what the people watching me think it is. He moved from the window, toward her, stopping with a few feet between them, hugged to that careful distance he always maintained, that distance that was its own kind of pressure. It's not weapons, not narcotics. His voice was even, low. Documentation, safe passage, new identities for people who have no other options. Mostly women. Mostly people running from things that don't have legal remedies. She held his gaze. The funding isn't clean, he said. I'm not asking you to call it clean. But the thing itself, what it actually does, that was always mine. He was close enough that she could see the exact quality of what was on his face, which was not performance and not strategy, which was simply true. Whoever sent you, he said quietly, told you something different. I want you to have the full picture before you decide what to do with it. The room held its breath. She looked at him and thought, they already knew. They've always known what moved through Busan, which meant the end point they needed from her wasn't information. It was access. Why are you telling me this? She said. Because, he said, I think you already know most of it, and I'd rather you hear the rest from me. He was 3 feet away. His eyes hadn't left hers. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She didn't reach for it. He glanced at the pocket, back at her face. You should take that, he said. In a minute, she said. Neither of them moved for another 3 seconds. Then she stepped back, pulled out the phone, looked at it, confirmed status. Timeline moving up. The clock, she thought. There it was. She put the phone away. I need to go. I know, he said. She left. She walked down the hallway with her shoulders straight and her breathing even, and the message burning a hole in her pocket, and she thought, I have 48 hours, maybe less, to make the most consequential decision of my operational life. She thought, I think I already know what it is. She thought, I'm not ready. She went back to the hotel anyway. She had a transmission to make and a choice to unmake, and exactly no time to be afraid of either. She sat on the hotel floor with her back against the bed. Old habit, sleeping elevated felt like a liability, and she ran it clean. The mission, gather intelligence, extract the Busan endpoint, report back. The truth, an operation this resourced already had the Busan endpoint. They had known before they deployed her. The endpoint they needed wasn't a location or a logistics chain. It was her, close enough, trusted enough, for when the moment came. The man at Silver Lake. Could be ours from a parallel operation, a test of her positioning, a confirmation that she was in range. She was bait. She had built the setup herself by being exactly who she actually was, which had always been both her greatest operational asset and the thing that cost her the most. She thought about the way he'd stood 3 feet from her and told her the truth about Busan. She thought about his hand near hers at the lunch table, neither of them moving. She thought about his eyes dropping to her mouth, 1 second, maybe less, in the Silver Lake room. She picked up the secondary channel. She sent one message, not to her handlers. They're not coming for the operation. They're coming for you. 72 hours, maybe less. Move your people. Now. She sent it. She sat in the silence of what she'd just done. Her cover, gone. Her arrangement, ash. The careful, managed shape of her current life, finished. She breathed. His response came in 4 minutes. Come to me. Her phone buzzed again. Her handlers this time, which meant the monitored phone had flagged something and the timeline had collapsed. She had maybe 6 hours before they figured out what she'd done. She stood up. She picked up her jacket. She went. Midnight. His office. He was standing. The first time she'd seen him not fully composed, though composed was still the word. Running fast now underneath it. 2 of his people were in the room. He sent them out without looking at them, and the door closed. He looked at her across the room. Something moved through his expression when he saw her face. Quick, controlled, almost gone before it arrived. But she was watching closely. You were sent to set me up, he said. Yes. Silver Lake. A test of my position, confirming I was close enough. He nodded. How much time do we have? 6 hours maybe. They'll know I flipped by morning. He was already moving, to his desk, to the phone, and she watched him and thought about the fact that the man she'd been sent to destroy was now the person she was most concerned with keeping alive, and that this would be, by any objective operational standard, a catastrophic failure, and that she was not currently experiencing it as a failure. The Busan network, she said. The people in transit. Already moving, he said without looking up. I had contingencies. He paused. I've had contingencies for a long time. I knew someone would come eventually. He stopped. Didn't expect it to be me, she said. He looked up at her then. I didn't expect it to be complicated, he said. The room held that for a moment. He came out from behind the desk, slow, deliberate, and crossed half the distance between them. Not all of it. He never took what hadn't been offered. Why? He said. Just that. She looked at him. She looked at the 3 feet still between them and thought about all the versions of this answer she could give. The operational one, the strategic one, the one that kept everything at arm's length. Because the people in Busan matter, she said, and because... She stopped. His eyes were on her face, patient, waiting. And because I'm tired of invisible, she said. Something shifted in him, in the quality of how he was standing, in the specific softness that came into his eyes, which she had never seen on him before, and which was exactly as difficult to manage as she'd feared it would be. He raised one hand and tucked a piece of her hair back from her face. Just that, careful and deliberate and completely unhurried. She felt it everywhere. Go, she said. Move your people. I'll still be here. I know, he said. He held her gaze for one more second. One long, certain beat. And then he turned and left, and she stood in his office alone with her fingertips pressed to the windowsill where he'd been standing. And she breathed, and she let herself feel the full weight of the choice she'd made. It was terrifying. It was also the most honest thing she'd done in years. Her phone buzzed. She looked at it. Where are you? Check in now. She put it face down on the windowsill. She waited. The call to the monitored phone came at 3 a.m. She wasn't at the hotel, but the call told her what she needed to know. The timeline had collapsed. They'd confirmed her position, and they were no longer interested in maintaining the appearance of a controlled operation. She sent the information to Jae-won. He responded in seconds. People are through, files are clean, 2 more hours on the last channel. And then, after a pause that she spent staring at the ceiling of a borrowed car. Are you safe? 3 words. She'd had people ask her that before. Handlers, coordinators, the occasional superior with enough conscience to perform the question. Nobody had ever asked it the way he asked it, which was like someone who needed the answer for reasons that weren't administrative. Working on it, she sent. That's not yes. No, it's not. A pause. And then where are you? Outside your building. He appeared in the lobby 30 seconds later. Not Choi, not a driver. Him, personally, in the same clothes, jacket finally shed, moving the way he moved when there was no one to perform composure for. He got in the passenger seat, looked at her. She looked back. The city was doing what cities do at 3 in the morning, completely indifferent to the 2 people sitting in a parked car, with 6 hours before everything changed. The light was wrong, orange and gray and entirely unflattering, and she thought, this is what he looks like when he's not managing anything. And the thought was more dangerous than anything else she'd encountered in the last 10 days. They've confirmed I flipped, she said. I know. They'll have a secondary operative already positioned. Someone I don't know. I know that too. He was looking at her, and she could see, at this hour, in this light with no audience, the full weight of the last 10 days on him, the tiredness she'd clocked every morning since day 3, the specific cost of building something that requires you to stay invisible while building it. I've been doing this alone for a long time, he said, not for sympathy, just as a fact. I know, she said, and you're here anyway. And I'm here anyway. He looked at her for a long moment. Outside somewhere, a car passed. The light shifted. Then his hand came over and covered hers on the gear shift. Not long, just for a moment, warm and deliberate and completely without pretense. And then he withdrew it and said, North. There's a property in Ventura. We can stage from there. She turned the key in the ignition. Her hand was still warm where his had been. She drove. The parking structure was concrete and pre-dawn gray, and the last of his people had moved through their channels 2 hours ago, and now it was just this. She knew they had sent someone. You don't run an operation of this cost and accept the loss of your inside person without already having a secondary positioned. She had been that secondary once, the cleanup after someone else's conscience. She knew how it worked. She knew the timeline. She had maybe 20 minutes, maybe less, before the geometry of this location became untenable. She had the weapon she'd been issued in Pasadena. She'd had it the entire time. Never used it, never needed to. And she was standing in this parking structure with it in her hand in Jae-won Oh, 10 feet away, and she understood with crystalline clarity that she was standing in the architecture of an objective she had already decided not to complete. But her hand was shaking, not from fear of him, from the weight of 12 deployments and 4 identities, and the word non-compliant in a file she wasn't supposed to have read, from the specific grief of a person who has spent years being useful and is now standing in a parking structure at 5 in the morning, trying to figure out what she is instead. He looked at her hand. He looked at her face. He didn't step back. Do it, he said quietly. She looked at him. If you need to, he said, if that's the only way you see through this, I'm not going to perform for you. I'm not going to beg or bargain. His voice was completely even, completely honest, the same voice he'd had in every room. But I think you already know what you're going to do. I think you've known for a while. Her hand wouldn't stop shaking. He stepped forward. One step, the same deliberate, unhurried way he had always moved toward her, giving her every opportunity to step back, never once taking what hadn't been offered. And then another. He was close now, close enough that the gun between them was the only remaining distance, and both of them understood what that meant. You're shaking, he said. She knew what was coming. She knew it the way she knew exits and arm angles and the weight of surveillance, in the body before the mind. He almost smiled, that same fractional, honest thing. It's not good. One more step. His hand came up, slow, giving her every opportunity, and he tucked the piece of her hair back from her face. The same thing he'd done in his office, the same careful, deliberate touch. Her throat moved. It means, he said very quietly, you still have a choice. The gun came down. She lowered it to her side, and the distance between them closed. Not precipitously, not all at once, just the last inch of something that had been closing since a conference room in Koreatown when she had looked up and found him already there. She looked at him. He looked at her. Neither of them pretended. They're going to keep coming, she said. I know. You can't stay static. The operation needs to move, change shape, harder to target. I know. His hand dropped from her hair to the side of her face, barely, fingertips only, the most careful thing, and then dropped further to his side. I need someone who knows how they think. Who can read the rooms I can't read, see the approach before it arrives. Someone like me. Someone exactly like you, he said, and I'd like to stop pretending that's the only reason. She held his gaze. That's the most direct you've been. I'm tired, he said. I have been for a long time. And you were right about that too, which I find extremely irritating. Despite everything, the gray light, the 20 minutes she didn't have, the weapon at her side, she almost smiled. Full access, she said. Every name, every channel, the complete shape of the Basan network. Not to report it, to protect it. That's significant trust. Yes, and you're going to give it to me because the alternative is a loan, and we both know what a loan has cost you. He was quiet for one beat. You read everything, he said, or I told you that in the first week. You did. He looked at her, one long, unhidden look, and said, all right, not okay, not fine. All right, the specific weight of something committed to. She put the weapon away. Her hand was at her side. His was at his. The morning was coming in through the open levels, gray, ordinary, indifferent, and she turned her hand slightly, just slightly, the same way she'd done in the car. He looked down. He looked at her face. He took her hand. They walked out into the morning together. Not safe, not finished, not simple. And the city waited ahead of them, and somewhere behind them a clock was still running, and none of that had changed. But she was not invisible. She was chosen. For the first time in longer than she could name with any precision, she was entirely, completely, irreversibly chosen. And in that, she thought, was enough to start with. Sophia Kane is not done, not even close. If this story lived in you, subscribe right now. Drop a comment. What does she do first? What does he do first? And what happens when the man in the gray coat finds out she walked? Like the video if you want part 2. The people in Busan are still running. The gray coat is still out there. And Sophia has never in her entire operational life left something unfinished. Stay watching.